22-year-old French student currently pursuing my master's degree in Amsterdam in a student-only building. The neighborhood is calm and nice, with the occasional sounds of trams passing by or the distant noise of parties in other student buildings. But one night, it was around 10 o'clock, when I heard a knock on my apartment door. I live on the 3rd floor, and to reach my front door, you have to use a key to open the main entrance, and then another key to open the door to my hallway. This means that only people with a key can come in. If someone wants to visit, they can give me a call or ring my doorbell, and I'll open the door for them. It adds an extra layer of security to our building, ensuring that only authorized people can access our floors. On a regular day when I heard someone knocking on my door, I usually open the door without much thought, whether it's my landlord checking in or a neighbor asking for something. As I've mentioned, I generally feel safe in my building, and I can take care of myself if needed. At this time, for some reason, I had an uneasy feeling. It's not that I felt in immediate danger, but something felt off. At first I didn't do anything, as I figured the person would go away. I had just finished my assignment and wanted some peace, but the knocking didn't stop. I stayed put, thinking they'd leave soon, and I could finally relax after my hard work. The knocking continued for a good 30 seconds, so I decided to speak up and said, "Hello." The voice replied in English saying, "It's Uber Eats." It seemed strange because most people here usually speak Dutch, and I recognized the voices of those who live on my floor. But it wasn't a neighbor or my landlord. The person claimed to be from Uber Eats. But the thing is, I didn't order anything from Uber Eats that day. It made me feel a bit confused. Also, the voice sounded strange, like maybe someone playing a prank or a neighbor trying to trick me. It was a deep voice, maybe around 40 years old, and definitely sounded like a person who smokes a lot. I said, "I didn't order anything. You might have the wrong address." But a few seconds later, the knocking kept going and the same voice said, "I'm pretty sure you did. I have an order under your name." Now, that made me panic. I looked around and grabbed a baseball bat, just in case he tried to break the door because the knocking was getting louder and stronger. I checked if the door was locked, and to my horror, it wasn't. I was only 10 centimeters away from him, and my front door was the only thing keeping him from coming in. But luckily, the door didn't open from the outside without a key, even though it wasn't locked. So I took a step back and asked again, "What's the name?" He seemed to be thinking for a few seconds, and then there was another loud knock. It felt like he was really angry and frustrated. Then, after a few minutes, he gave up and went down the emergency stairs next to my apartment. The steps were really loud, and it seemed like the person was in a big hurry. I wasn't sure what he wanted, or what might happen if I opened the door. I still don't get how he got through the first 2 doors. Then I thought if he tried knocking on other doors before mine. So I shared the incident on our building's WhatsApp group, asking if anyone else had seen something unusual. It turns out nobody witnessed anything suspicious, and no one had opened the door for anyone else. But I'm fortunate that my instincts kicked in, warning me not to open the door. A couple of years ago, when I was 25, I shared an apartment with one of my best friends. But sadly, our friendship started fading, as she wasn't around much. However, on this particular night, she decided to stay over and went to bed early. Due to my job schedule, I often stayed up late, and during that time my routine usually involved watching YouTube videos and relaxing. So on this particular night was pretty normal. But something strange happened. My neighbors actually tried to kidnap me. Now let me share a bit more about where I lived and who my neighbors were. Our house had 3 bedrooms, and the 2 bedrooms, along with the kitchen, faced the neighbors who were a young couple residing in a smaller mill house. They kept showing up at our door, always asking for weird stuff. I'm usually cool with helping neighbors, but these requests were kinda odd. For example, they wanted us to fill up this old Mountain Dew bottle with water because theirs got turned off or something. They also asked for beer, and one time they literally asked us for just $1. It was getting a bit weird. When we didn't answer, I'd peek through the window to check. It was strange. Sometimes I'd catch them grabbing leftover cigarette butts from the ashtray or squishing their eyes against the door peephole trying to see if we were home. So I'm sitting on the couch watching YouTube when I hear a knock at the door. I rolled my eyes because I knew exactly who was knocking. It was 11 p.m., and when I checked through the little door window, there he was, the boyfriend on my porch. Normally, I'd just ignore it and go on with my night, but this time he looked kind of troubled. So I decided to open the door and see what was up. Hey, I just wanted to ask if you could do me a favor. I got a ring here in my pocket from my girlfriend, and I need someone to record the moment. Can you follow me to my backyard and film it for me? He nervously asked. It was unexpected. I was pretty confused, but really wanted to find out what was happening. I congratulated him and told him I'd join in a moment. I just needed to put on my shoes. Once I closed and locked the door, I rushed to the back room with a view of their backyard. Peeking through the blinds, I expected to see some decorations or a setup, but it was totally dark. No signs of anything. It felt odd, so without wasting time, I woke up my roommate to share the whole story with her. No way, she told me, and we both walked back to the door after the boyfriend started banging on it. I peeked through the little door window again. It was pretty dark outside, and I couldn't see much. Then, I saw him move his eye away from the peephole. It gave me a chill, and I quickly turned around, pressing my back against the door. My roommate hurried back to the door from her room, grabbing 2 wire hangers like they were shields. We both clung to the hangers and sat against the door until he finally left. It was pretty scary, but we wanted to be sure we weren't overreacting. So we decided to go out through the back door and hopped into her car for a quick drive around the neighborhood. They always kept their front door wide open, and there were no blinds, so you could easily see inside their house. We drove by slowly in her car, sneaking into the living room. On the couch, the couple and the older man were all just sitting there, staring at the wall. We quickly drove away and decided to stay at a friend's house that night. After that, I stopped answering the door for them. But one day when I came home from work, I noticed an older lady parked in their driveway. As I got out of my car, she walked up to me and asked if I knew where the neighbors were. I explained that I hadn't seen them in quite a while. Then I asked her who she was, and she informed me that she was the owner of the house. She told me they hadn't paid rent for months, and it led to her having to evict them. When she went inside the house, it was a disaster. Needles scattered, garbage all over, walls with holes, and even a mess on the floor. I expressed my sympathy for what she had to deal with, and mentioned that I was glad they were finally out. But thinking about the condition of their house, I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't followed him to the backyard. And who knows what he might have had planned that night. When I was 19 years old, I had a job in the small mall in my quiet town. In our town, not many serious crimes happen, and it's a peaceful place. However, the city that's about 15 minutes away used to have the highest murder rates in Canada. The mall where I worked was not too big, and it was a common spot for moms with their kids and older people looking to pass the time. It's a really safe mall where I work. Not a sketchy one at all. But one day during my break, I headed to the food court to grab a drink and scrolling my phone, just like I always do. As I sat there, I noticed 2 women walking towards me. My first guess was that they saw my work uniform, and I thought they might have questions about something my store sells. I didn't think anything bad was happening. They walked up to me and sat down quickly at my table in the food court. Both of them talked with strong accents, though I wasn't sure what kind because I hadn't heard it before. They were dressed really fancy, like they were going to church or a special event, and seemed pretty regular. Nothing strange about them. Then one of the women takes out a book, and they start asking me some strange questions like, mostly things about religion. So I think they might be some kind of missionaries. They start telling me about God the Mother. Since I'm really shy, I just listen to them talk. Then they invite me to a youth group they organized for that evening. I'm a bit surprised, not expecting such an invitation during my break at the mall. I said I was at work, just taking a break, so going with them wasn't possible, but they kept insisting. I had to repeat a few times that I couldn't join. Finally, they got the message, but then they asked for my phone number. They said they'd text me the details the next time they organized something. I felt a bit uneasy, but gave them my number to end the conversation. A couple of days later, I got a text from them trying to plan something for the youth group. I felt a bit trapped because I wasn't really interested, but I didn't want to be rude. I hesitated for a moment, thinking about whether to reply or not. Eventually, I decided to block the number. It wasn't that I thought they were going to do something bad. I just wasn't into the idea of going to a youth group. I hoped blocking the number would make it clear that I wasn't interested without having to explain it. A few months later, I was reading the news, and there was a story about a warning for young girls in our city regarding a human trafficking scheme. The report mentioned a tactic where women would approach and talk about God the Mother, trying to convince people to leave with them. I felt a rush of relief, realizing that I hadn't finished my shift that day when those women approached me. I wondered what might have happened. Moreover, I was thankful that I never responded to their text. It's strange to think about how a small decision like that might have kept me safe. All right, it was my time to go out with my kids for Halloween. Last year my wife did it, and we switch every year. My son is 7 and my daughter is 9, and they were super excited, all dressed up in their cool costumes. I usually stay on the street, keeping an eye on them while they run from house to house for candy. After about 30 minutes of walking, we reached a really good spot for getting lots of candy, a busy street in our neighborhood. There were so many cool decorations and things in people's front yards. So I got a little distracted, and I wasn't paying close attention to my kids. Then a few minutes later, they came back from a house with another girl, who was about the same height as my daughter. But the interesting thing was, she had this really weird homemade mask on. It looked like it was made from some kind of cardboard or similar material. Then my daughter asked if her new friend could come along for trick-or-treating. I said, of course. So we all went together as a group. I didn't know much about the girl, but I guessed she might be a friend from school or somewhere. As we walked, I noticed a really tall man following us. He was big, and I started to feel a bit uneasy. I couldn't figure out if he was just enjoying the decorations too, or if something else was going on. He had this mask that looked like an angry cat, which kind of gave me the shivers. Then I thought he might be the girl's dad, so I tried to start a little conversation with him. I said something like, nice weather, huh? But he didn't reply. He just stood there, staring at me with that creepy cat mask while our kids went up the stairs to the next house. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe he's just not a talkative person. I asked again, saying, "Hey, is that your daughter?" He just nodded, but he still didn't say anything. I thought maybe he's just not into talking, so I stopped trying to chat with him. We kept going for about 15 more minutes, going to different houses and collecting more candy. Then my kids came up to me and said they wanted to go home. This surprised me because we hadn't been out for too long and their bags were only about a third full. Anyway, I said okay. We waved goodbye to the man with the cat mask and his daughter, then started going home. But the strange part was when I looked back at them, they were just standing there staring at us. I checked one more time as we turned the corner, and they were still standing there, not moving at all. At this point, I decided to ask my kids, so, who was that girl? My daughter looked up at me with a really confused look on her face. "She's your friend," my daughter replied, looking pretty confused too. I was puzzled because I didn't recognize the girl, and it seemed odd that my daughter thought she was my friend. I asked her what she meant by that. Turns out the girl with the cardboard mask had come up to my kids. She told my daughter that she was a friend of mine, and explained that she was too shy to ask me directly if she could join us for trick-or-treating. So she hoped my daughter could ask me on her behalf. I didn't know the girl, but it seemed like a misunderstanding. Maybe she thought she knew me or got confused. Why would you think she was my friend? I don't have any friends who are kids. What my daughter said next truly surprised me and sent a chill down my spine. She explained that when the girl with the cardboard mask first came up to them, she wasn't even wearing the mask, so they saw her face. And it wasn't someone familiar. I couldn't understand why the girl would say she was my friend if we didn't even recognize each other. Later, we found out that she wasn't a girl at all. She was actually an older woman about my age with wrinkles on her face. What's even more disturbing is that this older woman had been quietly taking treats from my daughter's bag when I wasn't looking. That's why they wanted to go home, because they noticed the woman taking their candies. I brought my kids home and explained everything to my wife. We checked through all their candy, looking closely, but we didn't find anything suspicious or strange. We didn't call the police or anything because, well, nothing really bad happened. But now thinking about it, I kind of wish we had made a different choice. It's really weird that some people on Halloween wear masks to pretend to be kids. This happened around 10 years ago when I was 14. At that time, I lived in an old farmhouse, way out on a country road. Our house was surrounded by cornfields, and our nearest neighbors were 2 to 3 miles away. Living there was good because not many people came to our door to sell things or talk about religion, but a very few did. One night, only my mom and I. We were baking treats to sell and raise money for my little brother's Boy Scout group. My dad and brother were away helping my uncle with some cows, if I remember correctly. We were busy in the kitchen chatting and laughing. Soon we heard someone knocking on the door. A regular everyday knock like tap, tap, tap. Mom. She mumbled to herself and took off her dish gloves to open the door. I stood at the kitchen island, rolling out some dough for a few pies, and also watching my mother go to the door. I felt a little nervous in my stomach, but I thought it was just my usual worries. As my mom went to the door, the person outside tapped again, but this time it was like a beat tap, tap, tap. My mom stopped and turned back, looking pale. She walked back to the kitchen and went to the window facing the porch. She went to the side where you could see the porch really well. Mom pulled the curtain a bit to peek without anyone seeing her from outside. Then she went to the other side of the window to check the driveway. I had stopped what I was doing because at this point, making pie crusts didn't seem that important. Mom's eyes got big when she looked outside. Then she closed the curtain and stared at the floor. Her face showed both anger and fear. She took my wrist and led us to the closet, asking quietly if I had my cell phone. I did. Then, from the closet, she took out my dad's special Louisville Slugger baseball bat. Suddenly, the person outside banged on the door really loud. I gasped a little. Mom looked at me, telling me to be quiet, and took my arm. We went to my parents' bedroom and she locked the door and windows as we walked. At one point, she stopped at the living room window to peek outside. She closed it fast and made a frustrated noise. We made it to the bedroom and she pulled me inside, locking the door. Mom took my phone and started dialing while handing me the bat. She sat me down on the floor, where I'd be out of sight from the door, and opened the closet to get the gun case. She spoke quietly on the phone, but I was really scared and couldn't concentrate on what she was saying. She took out my dad's shotgun and loaded it fast. I looked at her frightened when she hung up the phone. She pulled me up again and led me out of the bedroom. We sneaked over to the other side of the house where the bathroom was. Mom gave me my phone and gestured for me to go inside. She put down the gun and looked at me with both hands on my shoulders. "You have to listen. Some guys are outside, walking around the side of the house." I stared at her, eyes wide, feeling myself shaking. "Why? What do they want?" "I don't know, but you have to stay in here, lock the door, and don't come out until I say, 'Got it?'" I nodded, and she squeezed my shoulders. I'm going to block the door from the other side. I won't remove it until I tell you it's safe." I understood right away. I heard her push the heavy quartz chest in front of the door, a box filled with quartz for many years. I sat on the floor by the window, holding onto the baseball bat. It felt like a really long time, but it was just 5 minutes. While I sat there, I heard 2 footsteps outside the window and 2 deep voices talking quietly. Are they really inside? Maybe not. No, there's at least 2 ladies inside. Heard them talking at the door. I got scared, started breathing fast, but covered my mouth with a towel to keep it quiet. Who were these people? Soon, I heard another voice. "Guys, let's go." Charlie saw cops down the road. Then I heard 3 sets of feet running toward the front of the house. I was crying a lot by now, tears pouring down my face. Was it over? Were they leaving? After a few more minutes, I heard a man's voice in the house. I started to panic, huddling into the bathroom corner. I heard my mom's voice on the other side of the bathroom door saying, "It's me. The sheriff's here. They're gone. I'm moving the trunk." I stood up, unlocked the door, and opened it. The sheriff and my mom were moving the trunk out of the way. I ran to my mom's arms quickly, and we stood there hugging. The sheriff said more officers were chasing the van and he needed to ask me and my mom some questions. My mom nodded, and we went to the kitchen where the air smelled like burnt cookies. The sheriff asked us questions, and that's when I found out what my mom saw. When she looked out and saw the man knocking at our door, she knew something was wrong right away. He was dressed casually in gym shorts and a tank top, not what a salesman or someone from a church would wear when visiting. So my mom thought maybe his car broke down or something and he needed help. She looked out at the driveway and saw something that scared her. There was a van in our driveway, parked so my mom's car couldn't leave. There was a man in the passenger seat, and another leaning towards the front of the van, talking to the passenger. But my mom noticed, even though both were still, the van was slightly rocking, like there were more people inside. While my mom and I were talking to the sheriff, a deputy came in, and he looked really pale. He looked at my mom, the sheriff, and me, and he said, "Sir, we caught up with the van. They lost control and swerved into the ditch, actually. Are any of them hurt? No, they're okay, but we have them in custody." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "There were 5 guys in the van. We asked them why they were here and why they were walking around your house. And what did they say?" "They claimed to be vacuum salesmen, sir, a team selling the product they made." The sheriff scoffed a bit. They took my mom outside and told her what they found. She came back inside, crying and holding on to me. After that, they called my dad and he rushed home. My other uncle, a really big guy, stayed that night just in case. My mom didn't spare any expense on home security and taught both of us kids how to shoot and load a gun. My aunt and uncle gave us one of their German Shepherd puppies. Mom had to train him to be a guard dog, but he was a goofy and affectionate pup when not on duty. However, even with that, Mom still wasn't reassured. My brother and I ended up going to self-defense lessons to make her feel safer. It wasn't until a few years later, while we were making cookies and homemade candy for a Christmas party, that I finally asked my mom about what was in the van. She was surprised that I asked, but knew I would find out eventually. So, what was in the van? They found rope, tape, burlap sacks, and even sedatives. After taking the guys back and hours of questioning, one of them finally broke and admitted they were having no luck catching anyone in town, so they went to rural areas. Even now, I'm very careful about who I open the door for, and I can't sleep without having some kind of weapon in the bedside table. It has really broken my trust in others. I met this guy while I was still with my boyfriend. But despite being 10 years older than me, if I recall correctly, he wasn't someone I found attractive. We only had about 20 minutes of conversation, and it was all very impersonal and polite exchanges. I only talked to him when it was absolutely necessary. It was just basic talk, nothing more. while my boyfriend and I started dating, and somehow that other guy knew about it. When we were excited to go to the club together, we noticed that this guy was following us. It made me nervous, and I started freaking out. I ran to the bathroom with my friend for safety while our boyfriend turned around to talk to him. That guy, however, started acting really immature, like a 5-year-old boy. He even started crying, and then ran away, leaving the nightclub. Then, about a month later, I found a disturbing love letter in my mailbox. It was creepy because he had delivered it himself to my house, meaning that this guy had followed me to my door before and found out where I live. Fast forward 1 year, and I don't go to the place I met him anymore because he practically lives there. My friends told me he hangs out there every day, almost like he's waiting for me to show up. We moved after a while, and during that summer at the new place, I started noticing that guy at the mall. At first I thought it was just a coincidence, but then a shop owner I know well tells me that the guy's been following me and even hides when I turn around. That really worried me. So I shared the whole story with the shop owner. He was concerned too and promised to let other store owners know about the situation. He also assured me that he would call security the next time if he sees that creepy guy following me. I now have my own first professional level full-time stalker, and my boyfriend and I were clueless about what to do. My family was just as lost, and we were super worried. The police couldn't do much since this guy wasn't doing anything harmful at the time. It's been well over 2 years, and things are tough. I don't want to work as a waitress even though I really need the money, because I know he would find out where I work and then sit there all day and night just watching me. I try not to work anywhere near the place I first met this guy, especially around the city center. Going to the mall alone is a no-go for me now. I always bring my boyfriend along. There are specific supermarkets and cafes I steer clear of because I know he hangs out there hoping to see me. It's disturbing because I don't even know his last name. But he has a strange control over where I can go or not. I really wish I could leave the city, but it's not easy. Even if I manage to go somewhere else, he knows both my first and last name. And all I know about him is his first name and what he looks like. It's kind of scary because he could find me easily. The situation might get even riskier once I finish university. I'm aiming for a teaching position, and they put all your information on the internet. So it makes me worry about my safety and what he might do. They have to do it so students can see. He might come to my open classes or lectures, sit down and pretend to be a student, but I really hope that never happens. Three years back, my wife and I bought our first house in the fancy part of the city, and we picked a place near my mom's house since she's been on her own since my dad passed away. My mom was born in South Africa before there was a vaccine for polio, and she got affected by the disease. She can't move her legs, so she's been using crutches or a wheelchair all her life. My wife and I really wanted a house near hers so that we could visit her a lot and take care of her. We also wanted to make sure she can be independent and do her own stuff without feeling like we're always watching her. I always worried about something happening to my mom, so it made me feel better knowing I could quickly go to her place to help, no matter if it was a small issue or a big problem. But one summer night in 2019, something bad happened, which I wasn't ready for. In the middle of the summer, I drove my mom to the airport, as she was going to South Africa to see her sister and my cousins. Because my older brother lives in another city and I'm close by, I took on the job of looking after her house while she was away, so I made sure to visit twice a week. It became my routine to water the plants, pick up the mail, check the answering machine, and do all the usual things that need doing in a house. I wanted to make sure everything was in order for when she came back home. Thankfully, a year ago, I got a security system for my mom's house. It's like having a helper that keeps an eye on things even when I'm not there. I set it up so I can use my phone to see what's happening at her place anytime. If a window or door is opened, or if something sets off the alarm, my phone lets me know immediately. I made sure to put everything in for security, except cameras. And later in the story, I'd regret not having them. But in my own house, I have cameras everywhere, inside and outside. They watch over everything, from my motorcycle in the garage to my snoozing dog in the living room. Fast forward a month. I finished work, hit the gym, watched a movie with my wife, and got ready for bed. Nothing unusual so far, right? But just after 2 in the morning, my phone started making a noise. I thought it might be an email or something from Instagram, so I ignored it. I really value my sleep, as I usually get around 5 hours a night. After I started dozing off, my phone kept making noise again and again. My wife woke up and said, "Turn it off, I'm trying to sleep." She often teased me about keeping the volume on at night, but I do it just in case of an emergency or if my mom needs us. I'm glad I didn't turn the volume off, because when I tried to check the notifications, it hit me suddenly, like a car crashing through my living room. I got a bunch of messages from the security system at my mom's house. Right then, the company watching the system calls my phone, and I pick up. The lady on the phone tells me that the home alarm is going off because the motion detector in the basement noticed movement several times. Then she says they've sent security people to check on my mom's house to make sure everything's okay. While I was on the phone with the lady, I checked the message again from the security system. I could see what she was telling me. I also looked at the locks on my mom's doors, and the system said they were all locked. Without looking more, I suddenly understood. Someone or something is inside the house right now. Remember, I was suddenly woken up from sleep and told that maybe someone broke into my mother's house. I was still half asleep, and I didn't have time to clear the fog in my mind. Because of that, I jumped to the wrong conclusion, and I thought my mother could be in danger. I quickly got out of bed and ran to the garage. I only paused to put on my shoes and grab my car keys. It was good I had pajama pants on because it was a cold night. I didn't stop to pick up a shirt, jacket, or any kind of weapon. I was in a hurry to reach my mother's place, like the ones the police use, which I usually bring for exploring around the city. So I grabbed the flashlight, placed it on my lap, started the car, and pushed the gas pedal down fast. I went way faster than the speed limit in the neighborhood to get to the house in a hurry. Trying to drive like a racer really wakes you up. When I reached my mom's house, I saw that all the lights were still off, exactly how I had left them. The alarm was so loud that it hurt my ears. People from nearby houses started coming outside, but there were no security patrol cars in sight. I ran to the front door while unlocking it from my phone, but when I yanked the door open, I found myself staring into the dark entryway of my mother's house. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I couldn't move. I was frozen with fear. I had never faced anything so frightening before. I've been through some pretty intense and crazy stuff before, even situations where my life was at risk. But nothing scared me as much as looking into what I was sure was the entrance to really scary things that happened in my childhood home. Just to note, at this moment, while standing at the door, my brain still hadn't reminded me that my mom was safe, chilling at my aunt's beach house in South Africa. With the thought of my mom in my head, my bravery kicked in. Step by step, I went into the house. I think my body's fight or flight switch got stuck on fight because I went searching instead of checking my mom's room. I literally hit the switch that turns on the lights in the basement, ready for a big fight. But you know what? To this day, I'm not sure if it was a huge relief or if I was terrified. Because when I looked around, there was absolutely nothing there. Not a single thing. I looked around where I was standing. The windows in the main part of the basement were fine. The lights from the motion detector were blinking, and my phone was buzzing to tell me about my own movements in the house. Then I realized, standing out in the open in the basement wasn't a smart thing to do. So I ran back upstairs, turning on all the lights in the kitchen as I went. I grabbed the biggest knife from the block. Then I went to my mother's room. I checked every corner, doorway, closet, and even under each piece of furniture. I did it slowly and carefully, making sure everything was okay, until I felt sure the main floor of the house was safe. I was sure the person who shouldn't be there must be in the basement. I took out my phone and turned off the home alarm so I could listen carefully. Then I checked the main room again, under the pool table, behind the couch, and even in the bathroom, but found nothing. But as I turned to go down the hallway, I saw the door to the guest bedroom was closed. I couldn't remember if I had closed it before or during another visit, so I walked up to the door slowly, trying my best to hear any sound. I grabbed the door handle and pulled it open. I can't be sure, but I might have gotten really scared. When I saw someone at the other end of the room with a big knife, I had to try my hardest not to faint. I was really scared. But I knew I had to do something. I gathered my courage bit by bit and reached for the light switch, ready to fight the intruder. The light came on and I dropped to my knees, crying. That's when I realized I was looking at my own reflection. The closet door in the bedroom had mirrored panels, and in the dark, they made me see something that looked like a scary person. Then I heard a car door close outside, and I thought it was the security patrol arriving in the driveway. The guy who claimed to be a security officer was standing there, but he looked younger than me. If you imagine the word intimidating in your mind, this man was the opposite. He was a bit chubby, smiling, and had a really young-looking face. He looked more like someone welcoming you into a house. I checked my watch, and the man had come a whole hour after I told the security company to send someone. I told the guy that I searched every part of the house and didn't find anything. I started to wonder not so nice thoughts about how useless this guy, pretending to be a security officer. But I'm a bit embarrassed about those thoughts now. He asked me if I checked the garage. My clever grin disappeared quickly. I reached for the button in my car that opens the garage door. The garage is an open space, and it's really hard to hide in there. I walked through, peeked inside the car, and then left the garage. I felt sure it was empty. The security officer gave me some papers to sign. Basically, it said he did come when the home alarm went off. I told him about the basement motion detector, showing lots of times where it recorded movement. Then I saw his face go pale, as he explained that the detectors his company uses don't just sense movement, but also check for changes in temperature in the room to avoid false reports of movement. After telling me this, he got into his car and drove away. I locked up the house, turned on the outside lights, and set the security system again. I leaned against my car, looking at the house, trying to figure out how the alarm could have gone off. It's supposed to work when it senses movement and heat, but there didn't seem to be anyone around. The very next day, I made sure to get security cameras installed outside the house, in the garage, and where the motion detectors were placed. It's been 2 years since that night, and I haven't shared this incident with my mom, brother, or my wife. I'm still puzzled. Was there really someone there? Or was there some weird reason for the alarm going off? I really hope I never have to experience that again. Sometimes not knowing the answer is the better choice. Just a few days before Christmas, my mom asked if me and my girlfriend could look after the house and take care of the dogs while she went on a week-long vacation with her boyfriend. We agreed, and the first few days were quite normal. My mom's house is on the edge of a small town in upstate New York. It's a peaceful place, and not much usually goes on except for occasional road work. It happened about 3 nights after we started staying at my mom's place. My girlfriend and I were just chilling on the couch. She was busy with her phone, and I was deep into playing Pokemon Shield on Switch. The clock was ticking, and it was around midnight. Suddenly we heard heavy footsteps from outside. It was kind of creepy because someone with really big boots had walked up onto the porch. The layout of my mom's house is interesting. There's a couch against the wall and big windows on both sides of it, so from where we were sitting, we could hear and see things happening outside. On the wall opposite to us is the front porch, so this guy was right behind us. He stomped around the porch, making heavy sounds. Then he got really close to the window on the left side of the couch and grunted, "Ugh, hell," in a deep, angry voice. My girlfriend and I were frozen in place, trying to understand what just happened. It took about 5 seconds for us to snap out of it. We quickly got up and decided to turn off all the lights in the house. Then we tiptoed to the laundry room, a place where he couldn't see us. After a little while, I felt like it might be safe to go to a different room and check if we could turn any lights back on. But when I peeked out of the window, I saw this big burly guy shuffling down the sidewalk opposite our house. It was around midnight in a small town, and it's not the kind of place where things like this happen often. The street was quiet, and the only sound was his footsteps on the sidewalk. The guy had a plastic bag in his hands, and he seemed a bit out of place with the late hour. Remember, it's very late at night in a quiet town, so none of the stores are open for him to get a plastic bag. The guy keeps doing this strange shuffle while holding the bag. Then all of a sudden he starts moving really fast in a funny way, across the street toward the parking lot near my house, and then he disappears. I go back to the laundry room and told her about what I saw. Then I bring her back to the window where I was looking to see if we can find the guy again, but he's not there. We check other windows in the house to see if he's outside any of those. My girlfriend looks out her window on the other side of the house, and that's when she saw him. But he's walking away. We talk about whether we should call the cops, and then suddenly we hear knocks on the door on the other side of the house. We rush over and the doorknob is jiggling like someone is trying to open it, but luckily it was locked. Then one of my mom's dogs, a small rescue pup, starts barking like crazy and growling at whatever's on the other side. He has a really loud, screechy bark, and I think that scared the person away. We called my mom to ask for advice. Then we thought about calling the cops, but around here, the cops aren't known for being super helpful, so we decided against it. My mom also told us not to bother, because she thought it might be someone who was drunk or high and didn't know what they were doing. Later I found out. It's not the first time someone showed up at our door all messed up in the middle of the night. But I'm not really sure what the guy's intentions were, and I'm really glad I didn't have to find out. I have lived in southern Alaska with my family my entire life. My whole family has stories about our property, and I've decided to share them. These stories are spread out over the 11 years that we've lived here. I don't remember the order, so I'll be telling them as I go. I will be using fake names for everyone, and just the first initial of friends and pets. The first story that comes to mind about this place is the voice in the woods. Our property is 50 acres, and about 75% of it is woods. My siblings and I would spend hours out there, but now we rarely go there at all. Now, I have a very large family, and we all live on this property except for my 2 oldest siblings. I live here with my grandpa, mom, dad, older twin sister, 2 little sisters, and 2 little brothers. The first time we heard the voice, it was just my little sister Allie and me. I was 13, and Allie was 11. The weather was warm during the middle of June, and we wanted to ride our dad's black 4-wheeler around the trails. We were on the other side of the property having fun, and we even stopped for a moment to play in the river. Then we started to smell something bad, so bad that it made me gag and stop the 4-wheeler. It smelled like a rotting animal that's been sitting in the sun for a week. We didn't want to know what it was that was dead and didn't want to stick around. I had started to drive away, down another trail, when I heard Allie yell my name, "Lynn!" I stopped the 4-wheeler and turned to her to see what was wrong, but she just looked at me, confused. When I asked her what, she said she hadn't said anything. I figured it was just in my head, but before I could continue driving, we heard it again. "Lynn." I could feel Allie's body go still behind me as she stared ahead. Something called my name in Allie's voice, and it was coming from in front of us where the smell was. I immediately felt the fight-or-flight response in me, along with the reaction to protect my little sister, and turned around as fast as I could, flooring it back to the house. I nearly flipped the 4-wheeler twice and almost hit a tree. I felt like something was watching us as we were leaving. Our dad saw the way I was driving on his new 4-wheeler, and I got in trouble. Neither Allie nor I told our dad what happened, because we didn't want him to think we were too scared to be playing in the woods by ourselves anymore. I didn't go back into the woods for a few weeks. The second time we heard the voice was when we were all in the woods, except for my older brother. It was me, my two older sisters, Mari and Renee, and my two younger sisters, Allie and Jolene. I was 15 this time. Mari, Renee, and Jolene were on our grandpa's six-wheeler. Allie was riding our mom's four-wheeler, and I was riding our dad's. We'd been out there for a while and were racing when we knew we weren't supposed to. We were also on the other side of the property again. That way we couldn't get caught. Allie was close behind me, and Mari was in front around the turn. She was waiting for us to catch up. As we sat there listening to Mari brag about winning, we all heard our mom yell, "Girls!" Thinking Mom was finally home from the store with dinner and needed help bringing in the groceries, we sped to the house, slowing down before we got close enough that she could hear us so she wouldn't think we were speeding around. When we got there, Mom was just getting out of her car. We parked the four-wheelers and got off, walking over to our mom. We asked her why she had called us and what she needed, but she looked at us strangely. She told us she had just come down the driveway and didn't call us. She wasn't at the house when we were called. Then I realized something that made my heart race and my blood run cold. Even if Mom had been at the house, there's no way we would have been able to hear her from the other side of the property, especially with the two four-wheelers and six-wheeler running. I didn't tell my sisters about that because I didn't want to scare them. The last time I heard the voice was only last month. I'm 19 now. I had a falling out with a close friend who had been to my house many times in the past. I'll call her N. It was 8 in the morning, and I was heading to my Jeep about to leave for work. Purse on my shoulder, full coffee cup in hand, I was ready to go. Then I heard N's voice coming from the woods. "Help." I stood there for a second, confused, and just staring into the woods, waiting to see if it would happen again. Was someone on our property? But soon I felt panicked and quickly got back inside because something about the voice was familiar. Other than the fact that it was N's, I felt uneasy. N hasn't been to my house in 3 years. Something about the voice was wrong. It was as if it were whispered and calm, not the way someone would be calling for help if they needed it. The voice also didn't sound organic, like it was a recording, but not from a radio or phone. It didn't make any sense, and because I didn't hear it again, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. I ended up running to my Jeep like a scared little kid, locking all the doors once I was inside. I took one more look at the woods, and I didn't see anything, so I left for work, driving a little faster than I should have up the driveway. I loved telling my coworker all the scary stories about my house because it would freak her out. When I got to work and told her what happened, she was jumpy for a few hours, and it really didn't help when one of our brooms fell off the wall without us being near it. I told her someone probably didn't put it back on the hook properly. It seemed to calm her down just a little. Ann has been in those woods before, and she knows how scary they can be. About 5 years ago, on the 4th of July weekend, she and I were playing hide-and-seek with my family in the woods. We were hiding together in a very small ravine in the center of the woods. It was hidden by bushes and devil's clubs. I remember the devil's club well because I got a blister on my ankle that hurt like hell. Ann and I played rock, paper, scissors as we were hiding. We heard walking coming toward us and thought we were going to get caught. A rule in my family when playing hide-and-seek is you're not allowed to leave your spot. We watched someone in a white hoodie and black pants walk by us. They would have seen us if they had looked to their right and down, but they didn't. We were eventually found by my older brother and walked back to the house with my auntie, who was also found. It was girls vs boys, and the boys won. It was perfect timing as well because my mom and grandma had just finished making dinner. But as Ann and I were getting ourselves some very full plates, I realized no one was wearing a white hoodie. It's okay. They probably took it off. But also, no one was wearing black jeans. I asked my dad if anyone had changed in the bathroom or something. Maybe they had thorns in their pant sleeves, but he told me he didn't think so. Ann and I told him about the person we saw walking past us, and he was worried, thinking someone was on our property. He also didn't like the thought of a trespasser in the woods with all his daughters hiding. My dad took 3 of my uncles and went into the woods. They were gone for about an hour. They must have checked the entire property. My dad even called my mom and told her to ask me where we saw them. When they got back, my dad said they hadn't seen anyone and sat down in the living room with everyone else. My uncles, on the other hand, were talking very quietly. I knew only my Uncle Jay would tell me what was wrong, and I was right. It had rained a few hours before we went to play in the woods, meaning it was muddy. My Uncle Jay told Ann and me that they didn't see any footprints anywhere near the spot we were hiding other than us two girls and my brothers. I was paranoid all night that I'd see the person in the woods walk by my window. The last time Ann was in those woods was when her, me, and our friend T decided to go camping out there. It was the end of summer, and us 3 girls wanted to go camping one last time before winter. We were too young to go camping by ourselves, so the next best thing was the woods on my property. Our campsite was pretty much dead center of the woods. We had my mom and dad's big tent that could fit 5 people, and my grandpa's 6-wheeler. My 2 friends T and N were so excited they didn't care about the stories. Honestly, so was I, and I wish I wasn't. We had gotten settled in our tent and started to play with a deck of cards I'd brought with us. As it got later and darker, well, as dark as it can get in Alaska, we decided to get comfy in our sleeping bags so we would be warm. N and I wanted to tell stories. T didn't believe in the paranormal, but listened to N and me talk about our favorite horror stories and urban legends. N and I, when talking about the Wendigo stories, would say, the W, instead of the actual name because we believed that saying its name would summon it. N is an Alaskan native, and so is her family. Her mom is the one who told us to never say the creature's name. T knew what we were talking about, and I'm pretty sure she knew not to say it, but she did anyway. What exactly is the Wendigo? T asked us. Ann and I whipped our heads in her direction, and I shouted that you should never say that word out loud. T only rolled her eyes and laughed. She wouldn't have been laughing if she knew what awaited us. It was around 1 or 2 in the morning when Ann woke me up. She whispered to me that she'd been awake for maybe an hour, and she could hear something walking around. My dad let me bring my mom's pistol with us, after we promised to be very careful with it, and that I'd be the only one to touch it unless absolutely necessary. I kept it near my sleeping bag. I was on the left side of the tent. N was in the middle, and I could see T was still asleep on the right side. N was a very light sleeper, and was woken up by T's snoring. She was trying to go back to sleep when she heard something. I listened carefully, and I could hear something walking around. It wasn't very close, but it was close enough that we needed to pay attention. I thought it was maybe a moose, bear, or something else. That was quickly shut down when I realized it sounded like it was on 2 legs, not 4 like I was expecting. N reached over and shook T awake, putting her finger over her mouth to show T to be quiet. Then N pointed to her ears. T listened and looked at us confused. I shrugged my shoulders, showing I had no idea what it was. I kept my hand on my mom's pistol just in case. I got out my phone and I saw that it was about 2:30 a.m. I texted both my mom and dad saying that I could hear something walking around our campsite. They didn't respond. I wasn't surprised because it was past midnight and my mom had just had my baby brother the week before. We listened as it got closer to our tent. We were now scared some animal was going to rip a hole in our tent and get us. It was getting closer to my side. So as quietly as we could, Ann and I scooted closer to T. Then we could smell it. It smelled so much like BO that I could almost taste it. T covered the bottom of her face with her blanket, and N was covering her nose with her hand. N looked to T and mouthed something that I couldn't see, but I could see the fear in T's eyes. Later I found out N had mouthed the word Wendigo to her. We stayed quiet out of fear. We refused to even move. Even breathing felt too loud. We didn't want to let the thing outside know we were in the tent. Whatever was out there felt evil. I tried to listen as close as I could, but it was hard because my heart was beating so loud. I'm pretty sure N and T could hear it. The sound of walking went around and stopped near the front of our tent. I was ready to shoot whatever it was through the tent. It was only a few seconds of silence, but it felt like hours. Then we heard the sound of a gunshot. We all jumped, and N gasped. It was loud, and I knew who it was. Our neighbor had a large collection of shotguns and would have target practice almost every day. I don't know what my neighbor was shooting at in the middle of the night, but I believe he saved our lives that night. He wasn't close enough to be shooting at the thing outside our tent, or even know that us girls were camping out there. We could hear the thing run past us and toward the river, away from us, my house, and our neighbor. It was fast. We sat there for a long minute, huddled together on one side of the tent, shaking. N asked in a hushed voice if we should go back to the house, but I was too afraid to leave the tent. I was scared the sound of the six-wheeler would bring it back, and I didn't want to leave all of our stuff out here. So we just went back to sleep. We were pressed tight against each other. I don't think we could have been closer, and I'm not sure if N really did sleep that night. The next morning, when we had the courage to leave the tent, we could see small moose prints around our tent. I tried to ignore the fact that it looked like it was standing on two legs, and I just hoped it was a curious baby moose. N and T came to my house a bunch after that, but we never camped in the woods again. T and I still go camping together, but we make sure to go somewhere else. That wasn't the only time T experienced something here. One day when T was staying over, she woke me up in the middle of the night. I'm not sure when this was, but I believe sometime near Christmas. She was sleeping on my bed and I was on the floor. It only took me a few seconds to realize why she'd woken me up. I could hear light tapping on my window. I looked up where I thought T's face was. Now, I live in the basement of my house. Half my room is underground and the top half is on ground level. There are no trees or bushes near my window, so it couldn't be a branch, and 1/3 of my window was covered by snow. It was in the winter and completely dark. The tapping lasted about another 30 seconds. T and I were just holding each other's hand, trying not to freak out. T was obviously more freaked out because she'd been awake longer. I'm not sure who it was, but someone turned on the light in the upstairs bathroom, illuminating the backyard and my room. The tapping immediately stopped. I didn't want to move, but I needed to take advantage of the light. I stood up on my bed near T's feet and looked out the window. At first I didn't see anything, until I looked a little harder. In the woods across the river, I thought I saw a tall person standing in the tree line. They were thin with long arms and legs. Their skin was almost white. I hope it was just my mind playing tricks on me, and it was just a strange-looking tree. But when I look out my window now at that same spot, I see nothing like I did that night. No tree out there looks even a little bit like that thing. After making sure my window was locked, I got off the bed and went to sleep, trying to forget about the tapping and the tall creature. Recently, my mom and I will hear whistling coming from behind our house across the river, like something is trying to get our attention. Every time I hear it, I'm reminded of that creature and the time with Mari. Mari, Renee, and I were riding our grandpa's six-wheeler. It was early spring, and the ice on the river was finally gone. We were behind the house at the end of the property. We were driving around and having fun when Mari randomly went quiet. Renee and I only noticed when she started to cry and panic. When we asked what was wrong, she wouldn't tell us. She sped to the house and ran inside, slamming the door behind her. Our mom thought we made her mad and we got in trouble. Mari kept it to herself for months, and Renee and I forgot about it. I remembered that moment when writing this and gave Mari a call. I asked her what she saw that day, and with a heavy sigh, Mari finally told me. Mari saw a very thin creature watching us from behind a tree. It was tall and pale. It almost looked like one of the birch trees near it. It was standing perfectly still with long arms, just watching us. When it noticed Mari looking at it, she swore it smiled at her. Its teeth were sharp and yellow. Mari was only able to look away when it slowly hid back behind the tree. Even writing this right now, I had to get up and make sure my window is locked. I know what skinwalkers and wendigos are, and I believe something like them is in our woods. I don't think it can leave the property or come into the house, but that doesn't mean our house is safe. Ever since we moved in 11 years ago, strange things have been happening inside. One day, my little sisters, Allie and Jolene, ran up the stairs and into the living room, nearly tripping over each other. They said they were cleaning out the closet and watched the garage door close shut on its own. I tried convincing myself that it was just a gust of wind or the tilt of the house, but I know you can't shut that door without using all of your body weight. Both my mom and dad have heard light footsteps running up and down the basement hallway when none of us kids are home. Us girls will hear creaking like someone is walking in our parents' room when they are both at work. When Renee and I were 15, we built a wall down the middle of our older brother's room after he moved out, and put a new door in the hallway. Our rooms have always been strange, even when it was Thomas's room. When Renee was staying at a friend's house, I heard and recorded knocking coming from her side of our shared wall. I went to Renee's room to see if there was something on her wall, but all that was there were her hoodies on the rack. My older brother has always been able to see things others can't. When Thomas was living here at the house, he lived in the basement. Thomas told me about 3 spirits he'd see in his room. 2 men that would argue all day, and at night one would be sobbing in the closet, and a little girl he would see in his room. She looked like she was about 5 or 6 years old and wore a purple sundress. He said she would just stand in the corner of his room near the door and stare at him, not doing anything. He called her Sally. Sally was on my side of the room, which meant I was the one who had to deal with her. When I told Thomas about things in my room moving and hearing knocking and scratching on my door where he'd seen Sally, he told me Sally seemed more active after I moved into the room. Now, I should mention I had a rag doll named Cinnamon, and she actually has her own story that I'll tell after Sally's. Cinnamon would sit on the left side of my dresser under my loft bed. Sally took a huge liking to Cinnamon and would try to play with her at night when I wouldn't be interrupting. I'd wake up in the morning to Cinnamon facing a different direction or find her on the floor. Things would move around Cinnamon as well, like my guitar or longboard falling or a drawer being opened when I wasn't in the room. I had enough of it and put Cinnamon in the garage, and my dad ended up moving her to the Connex we have on the property. I haven't had anything happen in my room since then, but stuff still happens outside my window. Now, for the story about Cinnamon herself. I named my rag doll Cinnamon because that's what it said on her apron. Cinnamon had red hair, black eyes, rosy cheeks, a cute white dress with red polka dots, and a white apron. Cinnamon was given to me as a Christmas present by my aunt when I was 4. That same Christmas, I had an allergic reaction that almost killed me. What did I have an allergic reaction to? The cinnamon in the gingerbread cookies my grandma made. I am still severely allergic to cinnamon. Not just eating it, but touching it will cause hives and rashes on my skin, and cinnamon-scented things have caused me to have breathing problems. It's honestly pretty dangerous for me during the holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. Almost everything has cinnamon in or on it. I believe that doll is evil, and with Sally attached to it, it might be worse or a little better. I'm not the only one in my family to have a rag doll. Renee once had one, and no matter what she did, she'd find that doll under her bed every morning. Even when Renee and I had to share a room, and even when we had to share a bed for a year, it would end up under her bed. Renee lost it when she was 10. We could never find it, and when we asked, no one knew where it was. Renee had named her rag doll Boogie Woogie. I asked my siblings what stories I should mention here, and Jolene told me to share the one with the moose. Jolene and I were the only ones home that day. Now Renee, Ali, and I all have dogs that will bark at anything and everything. If they see a moose, they lose their little minds barking. We heard Kay, Ali's dog, bark only twice. Jolene went to look at what he was barking at and saw the backside of a baby moose. I went upstairs to my parents' balcony to pay attention to the baby and keep an eye out for its mother in case she got too close to the dogs. When I got up there, I couldn't see it, but all 3 dogs were staring into the woods. They were all on edge. C, my dog, is a very large husky, and has never cowered away from anything but fireworks and me when he's in trouble. And to see him scared meant something was seriously wrong. I got my dad's binoculars and tried to find the baby moose. Jolene had now joined me on the balcony, and we couldn't find it. So we decided to get in my Jeep and drive over to where Jolene originally saw it. Lazy, I know, but I didn't feel like walking around in my PJs outside. Jolene got out with the binoculars and walked up the hill. She stood up there for about a minute before saying, Lynn, come here, something's wrong. I got out and joined her at the top of the hill. I could see the baby moose now. It wasn't moving. I took the binoculars from Jolene and looked for the moose. She was right. Something was very wrong. This moose was not okay. It had the features of a full-grown female, but it was the size of a baby. Its neck was too long and thick. Its eyes were too big, and it was just staring at us. It took one step toward us, and I knew we needed to run. The way it walked was messed up. It brought its leg all the way up until it touched its stomach, then put it back down and stepped closer. I grabbed Jolene's arm and pulled her down the hill and into my Jeep. Then I could smell it. The smell of a rotting animal. Jolene was gagging and nearly threw up, and I'm glad she didn't because she would have refused to open the Jeep door. I parked as close as I could to the front door of the house and ran inside with Jolene. We called our dad and told him what happened, but he didn't think it was anything serious. He also joked that it was a Skinwalker at dinner. I felt a ping of fear every time he said Skinwalker. In the summer before fall, my mom, sisters, and I will clean up any garbage on our property next to the road. We stop when we reach the cliff overlooking the woods. Last year, Allie spotted a jar, and when she took a closer look, she saw it was a jar of dead bees. Allie called me over to show me, but then we noticed all the strange things about it. It was on the edge of the cliff, perfectly placed. The grass under it showed it had been there for a long time. How did we never see it? There was no lid on the jar, and there was nothing but bees in it, and I mean nothing. No dirt, no leaves, no other bugs. How could it sit there for so long and have nothing else in it? Allie and I got a weird vibe and decided to leave it alone. I got rid of it this year when I told a coworker this story, and she told me it could have been something used for witchcraft. The strange thing about it was that there were no more bees in it. All there was a black tar substance. I tossed it in the trash and forgot about it, just happy it's gone. These two stories Allie and Jolene told me to mention. Stories about when we had just moved in. When we were all younger and had just moved to this house, we had a pink unicorn stuffed toy that was almost our size. Us girls were home alone with our brother, playing on the phone that we shared. We had a king-sized bed that all four of us girls slept on. Mari, being the oldest of us girls, slept on her own bed on the floor. Our pink unicorn was sitting in a small chair in the corner. It was my turn on the phone. I think we were playing Subway Surfers. Then Renee gasped and pointed to the stuffy. "It just moved its leg!" Us girls, being scared and intrigued, set up the phone, pointed it at the stuffy hit record, and ran out of the room. We waited about 5 minutes before asking Mari to go in and get the phone. We watched the recording as we were huddled on the corner of the couch. After 4 minutes, we started to think we were just being silly and that Renee hadn't seen anything. But in the last 20 seconds of the video, we watched in shock as the pink unicorn's right leg moved, followed by its left arm moving as well. Both had moved to the right. We screamed and ran downstairs to our brother's room in the basement and showed him the video. We begged him to get rid of it, and he did. By giving it to his sweet lab dog MJ as a new toy, she tore that thing to shreds. When we showed it to our mom and dad, they tried to convince us it had just shifted. We didn't believe them. My grandpa had asked what I've been writing, and I was reminded of another story that I'd like to share. My grandpa's room is across the hall from mine, and my grandpa was helping my brother with a few things in his new house. My brother asked me to watch his dog Black Lab MJ while he was getting everything ready. I didn't want her in my room because the last time I watched MJ, she chewed up my photo book. So my brother put her in our grandpa's room after making sure she couldn't reach anything. All I needed to do was pop my head in the room and make sure she was okay with her food and water, and take her out to go potty every 2 hours. One night my grandpa had to stay over at my brother's new house to help the moving van in the morning, meaning I would be watching MJ overnight and sleeping in my grandpa's room. My grandpa is a very heavy sleeper. The man has slept through earthquakes. But this one night, I woke up to the sound of knocking, and MJ sat up in the bed. I thought maybe it was already 5 a.m., and my mom was going to tell me to go upstairs and watch Alan. I yelled out, "Yeah," and was about to tell my mom to wake up Renee because I had MJ. No one answered, and then I realized, if my mom was knocking on Grandpa's door, she remembers I have MJ. Confused, I got up and opened the door. No one was there or even down the hallway. I popped my head into Renee's room to see if she was messing with me, but she was asleep. It couldn't be my sisters, because I would have heard them going back up the stairs. When I got back to Grandpa's room, MJ was now sitting on the floor in front of my grandpa's bathroom. She must have wanted in there because that's where her food is. Thomas doesn't want her to have access to her food at night because then she'll need to go potty. She looked at me, then jumped up on my grandpa's bed again, ready to go back to sleep. I was about to get in the bed when I heard the knock again. This time I was more awake and realized with wide eyes it was coming from the bathroom. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed MJ off the bed and ran into my room, locking the door behind me and getting into my bed. After a while of laying in bed praying not to hear the knocking, aging, or worse, hearing it on my door, I was so exhausted and was finally able to fall asleep with MJ next to me. The next day around noon, my brother came to get MJ to bring her to her new home, unpack all his stuff, and relax after all the moving. I wasn't even mad when I woke up and saw that she had gotten into my trash and it was all over my room. I was just happy to not be in my grandpa's room. Thomas asked me how she was, and I told him what happened. Thomas wasn't even surprised and told me he'd always gotten a weird vibe from that room. That was the real reason he didn't pick it when we moved in. He originally said he let Grandpa take it because he'd feel bad making Grandpa walk all the way upstairs to use the bathroom. Now I'm wondering if that knocking happens every night and if my grandpa just sleeps through it. What is in that bathroom? This last story my sister suggested is going to be about the white Ram music box that was left here by the previous owners, and I don't blame them. Since the day we moved in, we've always had this white Ram music box, and since the day we moved in, we've never liked it. My mom got rid of it after 4 or 5 years of having it, thankfully. The reason my mom got rid of it is that it would randomly start to play, and it was the creepiest effing sound I'd ever heard. We looked at it multiple times and couldn't see anything wrong with it. No one would ever wind it up or mess with it. It would just start playing, and most of the time, it would happen at the worst moment. If we were watching a horror movie, it would start to play. If we were playing hide and seek, it'd play when we were all quiet. If we were arguing, it'd interrupt us. Most of the time, it would play when someone was alone. Like if we were just hanging out in the living room alone, it would start to play. It was like it was messing with us, like it loved when we were scared. I've had enough of this house and property. I'm trying to move out with my dog C, and it hasn't been easy. So is Renee and her dog M. So far, the best thing to do is try to ignore all the strange things. Just yesterday, we were all outside playing badminton and heard what sounded like a mix of a banshee screaming and a car trying to start. Our baby brother Alan was the only one to acknowledge it. Alan is like Thomas, or it could just be that he's young, but he always sees our grandpa, who passed away long before Alan was born, and our deceased pit bull, B. Alan is actually named after our grandpa too. A part of me is creeped out by this, and the other part is happy that they aren't alone. Alan never sees just Grandpa or just B. He always sees them together. Alan also used to see something in the bathroom that would make him run away crying. Alan was still learning to talk at the time, but when he was able to and we would ask, he didn't remember. We used to have an American pit bull named B. He was an old dog, and one of the most loving I've ever known. I'd gotten used to the routine of waking up, making coffee, and going on a walk with B. And I would normally go up the driveway and back down, giving B just enough exercise in the morning but not enough to exhaust him. But one morning, B started walking toward the woods, and I decided to follow him. B looks very scary, and even scarier when he's in a fight. B used to protect us kids from our old neighbor's dog when she'd get off her chain. The man didn't see anything wrong with his dog, even after my older brother got bit. She was just very aggressive and would attack anything and anyone with no reason. One day he was forced to put her down by the police because she had gotten off and attacked an elderly woman down the road who was now in the hospital. The dog was his ex-wife's, and he had no love for the dog. We moved soon after that. As I followed B, I realized everything was quiet, and I mean way too quiet. B stopped a little bit ahead of me, and I immediately felt like I was being watched. I looked around and didn't see anything. B was staring straight down the trail and was perfectly still. I didn't feel good about any of it, so I turned around and started walking back to the house, calling B to follow me. B was a very good and obedient dog. You never needed to tell him to do anything twice. And as we walked back to the house, B kept looking behind us. I felt something staring right at my back, and I started to walk a little faster. By the time I got to the house, I was running. I felt so bad for B because the moment we got in the house, he laid down, but he kept his eyes on the front door. He was the best dog a family could have. We miss you, buddy. I have many, many more stories, but none that seem to be long enough to tell. Like the old lady's face we see in the dark corner of our parents' room, the baby handprints that will show up on Mari's mirror, the black-haired woman hanging in the shower that we see in the reflection of the bathroom mirror once a year, or the uneasy feeling of being watched at night from the windows. I don't know why this property has so much activity, and I don't know if I want the answer to that, or if I want to know what all of it is. I realize now why my parents ignore it all. I can't wait to leave this place. When I spent the night at my friend's house in middle school, we liked staying up late. But the only tricky part was that the bathroom was near his parents' room, and we didn't want to get in trouble for waking them up, especially during those late-night nature calls. So, to avoid any problems, we came up with a plan. Instead of using the bathroom, we quietly sneaked out through the basement door and went into the woods to take care of business. The door was almost always open because we sometimes forgot our keys and got locked out. It happened a lot since we often went out to do things in the woods. On this night, my friend's older brother was around, and he kept barging in through the basement door, making the situation even more chaotic. So, we came up with a plan to try and stop my friend's brother from constantly barging in. We decided to lock the door, even though we knew it wouldn't really keep him out. The idea was that he'd have to use the key, and maybe that would take away some of the fun for him. But around midnight, we heard the door handle jiggling. At first, I didn't think much of it, assuming it was just his brother messing around. Then, after about 5 minutes of the handle being jiggled on and off, we got a bit frustrated. That's when we decided to take action. We went up to the door, hit it, and shouted at him to stop. However, all we got in response was silence. That was a good thing, and we hoped it was all over, right? But about 10 minutes later, the jiggling started again, and it kept happening. This whole thing repeated for about 2 hours. No matter how many times we told him to stop, he didn't listen. We got frustrated and just said, "Forget it," and decided to ignore him. Even after we stopped paying attention, he kept going for about half an hour more. It felt like forever. Then finally, he gave up. Let's jump ahead to around 9 in the morning. We were just waking up, and one of my friends needed to use the bathroom. You know how it is at sleepovers. People are sleeping wherever there's space. When one person starts moving around, it wakes everyone up. We all started stretching and heading to the bathroom to get rid of the soda we drank the night before. As I walked out, I grabbed the door handle to close it behind me and noticed it felt weird, like it had a rough texture. When I checked it, I saw that the area around the keyhole was messed up. There were big scratch marks everywhere, and the metal parts were all bent and crooked. I asked my friend who lived there what happened, and he said it was the first time he noticed it. We didn't want to get blamed for what his brother did, so we went upstairs and explained everything to his parents. When his dad went downstairs to see what we were talking about, his face went all pale, and he hurried back upstairs to call the police. It turned out that someone had been trying to force the lock open while we were all in the house. It was pretty scary to think that someone had been trying to get in while we were sleeping. This happened to me more than once on different occasions. What made me really scared this time was that the person knew we were in the house and we knew someone was trying to break in. But he still kept trying to force his way inside, and it was pretty disturbing. I have no idea what kind of person he was or what he had in mind for us that night. Just a few days before Christmas, my mom asked if me and my girlfriend could look after the house and take care of the dogs while she went on a week-long vacation with her boyfriend. We agreed, and the first few days were quite normal. My mom's house is on the edge of a small town in upstate New York. It's a peaceful place, and not much usually goes on except for occasional road work. It happened about 3 nights after we started staying at my mom's place. My girlfriend and I were just chilling on the couch. She was busy with her phone, and I was deep into playing Pokémon Shield on Switch. The clock was ticking, and it was around midnight. Suddenly we heard heavy footsteps from outside. It was kind of creepy because someone with really big boots had walked up onto the porch. The layout of my mom's house is interesting. There's a couch against the wall and big windows on both sides of it, so from where we were sitting, we could hear and see things happening outside. On the wall opposite to us is the front porch, so this guy was right behind us. He stomped around the porch, making heavy sounds. Then he got really close to the window on the left side of the couch and grunted, "Ugh, hell," in a deep, angry voice. My girlfriend and I were frozen in place, trying to understand what just happened. It took about 5 seconds for us to snap out of it. We quickly got up and decided to turn off all the lights in the house. Then we tiptoed to the laundry room, a place where he couldn't see us. After a little while, I felt like it might be safe to go to a different room and check if we could turn any lights back on. But when I peeked out of the window, I saw this big burly guy shuffling down the sidewalk opposite our house. It was around midnight in a small town, and it's not the kind of place where things like this happen often. The street was quiet, and the only sound was his footsteps on the sidewalk. The guy had a plastic bag in his hands, and he seemed a bit out of place with the late hour. Remember, it's very late at night in a quiet town, so none of the stores are open for him to get a plastic bag. The guy keeps doing this strange shuffle while holding the bag. Then all of a sudden he starts moving really fast in a funny way, across the street toward the parking lot near my house, and then he disappears. I go back to the laundry room and told her about what I saw. Then I bring her back to the window where I was looking to see if we can find the guy again, but he's not there. We check other windows in the house to see if he's outside any of those. My girlfriend looks out her window on the other side of the house, and that's when she saw him. But he's walking away. We talk about whether we should call the cops, and then suddenly we hear knocks on the door on the other side of the house. We rush over and the doorknob is jiggling like someone is trying to open it, but luckily it was locked. Then one of my mom's dogs, a small rescue pup, starts barking like crazy and growling at whatever's on the other side. He has a really loud, screechy bark, and I think that scared the person away. We called my mom to ask for advice. Then we thought about calling the cops, but around here, the cops aren't known for being super helpful, so we decided against it. My mom also told us not to bother, because she thought it might be someone who was drunk or high and didn't know what they were doing. Later I found out. It's not the first time someone showed up at our door all messed up in the middle of the night. But I'm not really sure what the guy's intentions were, and I'm really glad I didn't have to find out.